Hello, everyone. Let everyone come streaming on in. Very happy to have you here this evening. Thank you all so much for coming. This is Left Bank Books in St. Charles City County Library. Welcome award-winning best-selling author Kristy Woodson Harvey, who will discuss her new book, Under the Southern Sky. Harvey will be in conversation tonight with the CEO of Moms Don't Have Time To, Zibby Owens. Left Wing Books is St. Louis's oldest independent bookstore. We would like to thank all of our supporters, the supporters of Kristy and Zibby, and everyone for their outpouring of love for our bookstore. Also, big thanks to our partners at the St. Charles City County Library. They are fantastic. Happy to have them partner with us for this event this evening, so thank you so much. Left Bank Books offers curbside pickup and delivery to anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world. We are happy to be able to bring our event series virtual. We believe that events are a way to expand your mind and bring in new thoughts to make the world a better place. We hope that you enjoy this event, and we hope that you support Left Bank Books by purchasing a signed copy for you or for all of your friends at left-bank.com. Purchasing a signed copy of the book from Left Bank Books allows us to keep our bookstore and staff operating. It allows us to keep this event series going. So thank you for your support. I am Shane Mullen. I'm the events coordinator for Left Bank Books. I help produce our hundreds of author events each year with a fantastic team here in St. Louis. We will be taking questions from you, the audience, at the end of the event, so please type your questions as a comment. We will have a little bit of a longer period of time this evening for questions, so be sure to have them ready. And be sure to follow Left Bank Books on Facebook to be notified about all of our fantastic virtual events. We have a ton of incredible events already lined up for the year, and I am adding events daily. About tonight's book, Under the Southern Sky. This book is one of Country Living's 20 best new books you don't want to miss this spring, one of Booksters' 8 most anticipated reads of 2020, one of Frolic's 12 most anticipated reads of 2021, one of Book Trib's most anticipated reads of 2021, one of Brit & Co.'s books you should read with your BFF. What a fantastic idea. Two childhood friends discover that love and family can be found in unconventional ways in this timely, moving novel from the USA Today bestselling author of the beautifully Southern, evocative Peachtree Bluff series, and that's from Kristen Harmel. Recently separated Amelia Buxton, a dedicated journalist, never expected that uncovering the biggest story of her career would become deeply personal. When she discovers that a cluster of embryos belonging to her childhood friend Parker and his late wife Greer have been deemed abandoned, she's put in the unenviable position of telling Parker and dredging up old wounds in the process. Parker has been unable to move forward since the loss of his beloved wife 3 years ago. He has all but forgotten about the frozen embryos, but once Amelia reveals her discovery, he knows that if he ever wants to get a part of Greer back, he'll need to accept his fate as a single father and find a surrogate. Each dealing with their own private griefs, Parker and Amelia slowly begin to find solace in one another as they navigate an uncertain future against the backdrop of the pristine waters of their childhood home, Buxton Beach. The journey of self-discovery leads them to an unforgettable and life-changing lesson. Family, the one you're born into and the one you choose, is always closer than you think. From the next major voice in Southern fiction, quote from Ellen Hilderbrand, who we all love, Under a Southern Sky is a fresh and unforgettable exploration of love, friendship, and the unbreakable ties that bind. Lisa Wingate, the #1 New York Times bestselling author of Before We Were Yours and the Book of Lost Friends, says, sometimes the key to new love lies hidden in old friendships. In Under the Southern Sky, Kristy Woodson Harvey stirs up a warm-hearted mix of hometown charm and the sort of thoroughly modern problems that bring us back to the people who know us best and the places that remind us of who we really are. And Country Living says, perfect for fans of beach reads, P.S. I Love You, and anything by authors Jennifer Weiner and Ellen Hilderbrand. A perfect pick for book clubs or a weekend read. Under the Southern Sky follows journalist Amelia as she makes a heart-wrenching discovery that changes everything. And about tonight's authors. Kristy Woodson Harvey is the USA Today bestselling author of 6 novels, including Feels Like Falling, the Peachtree Bluff series, and Under the Southern Sky. A Phi Beta Kappa summa cum laude graduate of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill's School of Journalism, her writing has appeared in numerous online and print publications, including Southern Living, Traditional Home, USA Today, Domino, and O. Henry. Kristy is the winner of the Lucy Bramlett Patterson Award for Excellence in Creative Writing and a finalist for the Southern Book Prize. Her works have been optioned for film and television, and her books have received numerous accolades, including Southern Living's Most Anticipated Beach Reads, Parade's Big Fiction Reads, and Entertainment Weekly's Spring Reading Picks. Kristy is the co-creator and co-host of the weekly web show and podcast, Friends in Fiction. She blogs with her mom, Beth Woodson, on Design Chic, and loves connecting with fans on KristyWoodsonHarvey.com. She lives on the Northern Carolina coast with her husband and son, where she is always working on her next novel. And tonight we are so happy to have Kristy in conversation with Zibby Owens. Zibby is the creator and host of award-winning podcast, Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Zibby, named NYC's most powerful bookfluencer by New York Magazine's Vulture, conducts warm, inquisitive conversations with authors as wide-ranging as Alicia Keys and Lena Dunham to Delia Owens and Britt Bennett, making her show a top literary podcast as selected by Oprah.com 2 years in a row. Before the pandemic, Zibby ran a literary salon, hosted her own book fairs, and was a frequent bookstore event moderator. During the quarantine, Zibby hosted a daily Instagram Live author talk show, ZIGTV, a weekly live show with her husband, KZ Time, launched an online magazine called We Found Time, and started Zibby's virtual book club. Zibby is a regular contributor to Good Morning America Online and The Washington Post, and has contributed to Real Simple, Parents, Marie Claire, Redbook, and many other publications. She has appeared on CBS This Morning, the BBC, NPR's All Things Considered, Good Day LA, and local news outlets. Zibby is a graduate of Yale University and Harvard Business Schools, and currently lives in New York with her husband, Kyle, and her 4 children. And now, I am so happy and proud to welcome our guests for the evening. We have Kristy Woodson Harvey and Zibby Owens. Hello.
Hi.
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 Oh, thank you for Sean. That was awesome.
It's really such a pleasure to have both of you here this evening. I am thrilled. I know that our large audience that is here tonight is thrilled to be able to ask you questions, to listen to this incredible conversation. I cannot wait. So let's get started.
Well, Kristy, congratulations on your publication. This is so exciting.
Well, thank you.
Do you
and
still
thank
get
you for
excited
all
after so many books?
Oh my gosh. Yes, it is. I think it's like a new baby, I guess. You know, it's like, oh, like you love it. You're so excited for it to be in the world. And yes, I'm thrilled. And it's been so fun to get to be back on tour. And I've been doing a few in-person events. So that's felt kind of weird and great all at the same time. And so, yes, it's so exciting. It's so exciting. Thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Of course. No, I saw on Instagram how you were actually with real people at book events. And I was like, that's amazing. I'm so excited that the world is coming back. So
I know, me too. Me too. It's great.
And by the way, when I was listening to your bio, I think it's a disservice to call you a great Southern writer. I mean, you are a great writer, full stop, period. Like that's you. It's not only in a region. Like the way you tell stories is so beautiful, and the stories themselves and the characters. So anyway, I think you need to, I don't know, shift the bio or something.
Thank you. Yes, like get some new quotes. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. No, I mean, I love the quotes. Just I don't know. I really loved this book, and it was so thought provoking. And how did you come up with the idea for this novel?
So it kind of like a lot of things, it came to me in stages, but the real spark for this story was a few years ago. It was probably 5 years ago, because it was right after my first book, Dear Carolina, had just come out. And I was at a party and a friend and I were talking, and she said, I was at the doctor today and we just found out that we have to decide what to do with our leftover frozen embryos. And she said, I just never expected this. It wasn't something we were thinking about. All we were thinking about was, this family and these children that we really wanted. And I think, before they had their first baby, they thought, well, we might have all of these embryos. We might use all of them. Like, you just don't really know. But then they ended up not doing that. And they were just having a hard time deciding what to do. And she said, you really should write a book about this because a lot of people are going to be going through this. And I was like, yes, I should. And it was one of those things that I knew just right away was going to be something that I was going to want to write a story about at some point. But it wasn't until a few years later that So Lies and Other Acts of Love was about to come out. The Peachtree Bluff series then came out. And of course, that was 3 books. So that took several years. And then Feels Like Falling. And I knew I was almost kind of like holding my breath because I thought, if I don't come up with a story about this topic, like somebody else, this specific thing that somebody else is going to, because I knew I really wanted to write about a man who had lost his wife and had to decide what to do with his leftover frozen embryos. So I was really holding my breath. And so I was pretty excited. I mean, I don't think there's been another book about it, but maybe there has. But at any rate, I'm excited it's out, and it's felt very timely right now.
It's so timely. When I sent you the article for the New York Times a few days ago about abandoned embryos, you posted that like 5 other people had sent it to you. I mean, it's like literally right now, this is top of the news.
It was unbelievable. No, when I saw it, I was like, oh my gosh. And like all these people were sharing it with me. And yeah, it was crazy that something so similar was in the New York Times, like just 2 days before the book was coming out. And sometimes I think, those are like the little nudges, like whispers we get from the universe, like, okay, you're on the right track. Like this was the right time. And I really felt like there were a lot of those things throughout this process. Like, one of the major things in this story is that there's an investigative journalist that is one of her childhood friends is the father of these embryos. And she sort of accidentally discovers that his embryos have been deemed abandoned. And so part of the inspiration for that was a big story in the New York Times while I was writing this book about abandoned embryos and how, their fate is kind of up in the air and what ethically can, doctors' offices do with them because no one's paying for their storage. But are they life? Are they not life? Can you adopt them out? Like, what do you do with these embryos? So I think there's been so much going on with this for the past few years anyway. And then I think we're going to start to see a lot more. So it's an interesting topic for sure. I could have written 10 books about it, honestly.
I bet. And I love the way you structured it, how you alternated who was telling the story when. You would have Parker, then you would hear from the leftover diaries of Greer, his wife who had passed away, from Amelia's mom, from the moms. I mean, it was so great to get everybody's point of view. And of course, everybody has different points of view on this particular issue, but then just, life in general and how they deal with the loss in their life, in their small circle. How did you decide to structure it this way? Particularly, I would say, Greer and how you got her voice into it, even though she had been passed away when the novel begins.
I was really nervous about that, to be completely honest with you. It was not something that I really originally planned on doing. I thought, we're going to have Parker and Amelia. I hadn't actually planned on having Greer or Elizabeth. And then as the story progressed, and for people who have read the book, Elizabeth, who is Amelia's mother, actually her POV does not come onto the page until like 80 pages in. But I started to realize that something was going to unfold in this story, and we couldn't see it from Amelia's point of view, and we couldn't see it from Parker's point of view. So we had to have somebody else in the story. And for Greer, I actually really just kind of played around with it. I was not sold on the fact that Greer was going to appear in this story. And I wrote a few of her journal entries at the beginning. And normally I don't let anyone read a book until I'm completely finished with a draft. But I actually sent the first maybe 7 or 8 chapters to my agent and said, is this going to work? Do you think it's too hokey to have her journal entries? And she wrote back and said, no, absolutely not. I think we need her. And the first journal entry that I wrote was the one where she's actually saying goodbye to her embryos. And I think it would have been a different story if we hadn't had that scene. And I think it would have been a harder sell on on why Parker feels so connected to these embryos if he had not seen how connected, this woman that he loved so much felt to them. So, but it was a risk.
And that was no, it worked. It totally worked. And I loved how even in the book you had other people then go read the same thing again. It was like kind of meta, right? Like she had the diary, you published it, like other people read it, and then you continued to sway the reader and all the characters over and over with why it was so essential to try this, which was genius. I loved that.
Well, it is something that I do think is contentious. And that was one of my main qualms about writing this story, is that, it's one of those issues where half the people that pick up a book about what people do with their leftover frozen embryos don't really care. And I mean, I don't mean that in like a flip way, but depending on how you feel about that issue, you just think, who cares? Get rid of them. But, going back to that New York Times article, it was so interesting. And I think the thing that really struck me about that article was how, the parents of those embryos, they were their children. Like they weren't born, but they were their children. And that's how I think people feel about it. And if you haven't been through that situation, I think it's hard for you to kind of understand that and like really feel that. And so I wanted readers to kind of feel how connected they felt to these embryos, even though, as Greer says, all the life that will never be, because that's kind of what they were to her.
Oh, wow. And even the ripple effects across generations, which you point out with the character of Greer's dad. So it's not just what the husband necessarily wants, but what about the family of the woman who has passed away? Or like, what about that and having to deal with another layer? Like that could have gone any direction. Like the father could have been happy or sad or angry or litigious or whatever.
Yes.
I just think it's so unclear what you're supposed to do.
No, you're absolutely right. And that's such a good point that you bring up, because that's happening in real life. I mean, I have friends who have frozen embryos and like they have wills written so that like if they die, like their sister has to approve what their husband does. I mean, this stuff goes very, very deep, but I think it also speaks to the fact that even 5 and 6 years ago, when my friend and I were talking about this, yes, lots of people were doing IVF, and this was a very, kind of normal way to have a baby at that point. But I don't think people were quite as up to speed on like, oh, wait, we have to figure out what we're going to do after. And, like, what if I die and I leave these embryos? Or what if we get divorced and who gets the embryos? And there's a big court case going on right now with like a couple who, it's in their will that, one of the members of the couple gets the embryos, but then the other one changed his mind and they're splitting up and they're in court over who gets the embryo. I mean, it's just very interesting to me. Like I said, I could have written 10 books about it. So it was really hard to decide like, okay, this is the story that I'm going to write.
And that's still only one piece. I mean, it's sort of the guiding principle of the story, but there's a whole nother piece of, so you have the embryos and everything, but then you have the relationship between Parker and Amelia and how they feel about each other. And you have the loss, right? You wrote so beautifully about that feeling of grief that, Parker sitting in his shower and like all these scenes, and the times where the grief sort of wells up when he wasn't expecting it, which I think is that's such a part of it too, right? He's like, wow, today it really knocked me off my feet. Whereas the other day he felt better. And tell me about how you're so tapped into grief. And I know from your essay in my upcoming anthology about your grandfather passing away, but tell me a little bit, right? That was such a sweet essay. Oh my gosh.
Thank you.
Gosh.
I'm so excited about the anthology. I cannot wait for that. Okay, so this is going to sound really weird. And I actually forgot about it until you just said this right now. I was actually in the shower and I just got this like swamped feeling of like being this other person who was like grieving this really big loss. Like it was very bizarre. I don't even really know how to explain it, but I remember like being like, oh, this is really weird. There's like some part of a story in this. It was almost like I sort of felt it. But there was definitely a lot of like loss going on in my life at that time. I had lost a really good friend very unexpectedly, and I was very like deeply sad about it. Like more than, you know how you have all those sort of layers of grief where you're sad and you're crying and you're at the funeral and whatever, but then the kind of like, you just sort of can't move past it sort of thing. So that was definitely going on. And my mother-in-law had just passed away after a really long illness, but it was very complicated because we were like evacuating for a hurricane and calling in a hospice and trying to figure out what to do. And our house got destroyed in a hurricane. It was like all at the same time. And honestly, like, I think I handled it all really well. If I'm being honest, I really do. I never kind of like just fell apart at the seams. I was like, okay, we're problem solving here. And so I think in some ways, just like the loss and like the grief of all of that kind of went into this story. It was just like, it was the way that I was like expressing what I was feeling, but I would not have told you that at the time. I didn't really actively realize that's what was happening until like, honestly, kind of now. Like as I've started talking about this book, I'm like, oh, well, that makes sense. Like I'm writing about this house, like crumbling at the seams, and like my house is like, half gone. And, I'm writing about these people losing people who are close to them and how that feels. And I've lost these people that are close to me. So I think, in retrospect, it's certainly not the same thing. I mean, losing a spouse would just be so monstrous, but I think it gave me enough to be able to kind of really put myself in the position of what that would feel like.
I'm so sorry about your losses, and thank you for sharing them. I think that's the thing about grief. Like, I feel like therapists should just like pick up someone's novel and like be like, all right, here are all the things that are probably going on with you that maybe you're not aware of, but they come out in fiction, or they come out in like these scenes, because after a while, your consciousness, you're wrestling with it, and for so long it has to seep out. It's like I don't know, like a sponge, or I don't know a good analogy, but
no.
Anyway, it's
so
interesting.
Right. And I think it's like my therapy. I mean, whatever is happening, I'm somehow putting it into these pages, and then that's where I go. Like that's where my escape is, and like my outlet. And I mean, even during COVID, I mean, I wrote so many books during COVID because I was just like, and they weren't about COVID. They weren't even negative. I mean, I wrote this really fun, happy Christmas book like during COVID, but it was because like, that's what I wished I was doing right then. I wrote that instead of focusing on all the things we weren't doing. So I think there's definitely some therapy happening on those pages for sure.
I mean, I think that's the great thing about reading and writing. It's that even if you're happy with where you are, the fact that you can just like toggle and enter, Palm Beach, looking at the Intercoastal, and then you're sitting on a beautiful porch, and all these ways you're physically transported and emotionally. It's like magic. So I just think the world of novelists, because it's just such a gift. So anyway.
Well, you are also an extremely talented writer too. And I think that you are. And I think all of that comes out, in our essays and things like that too. And that's why I think what you do is so incredible, because you're giving people outlets for all of these different things that they're feeling. And it's really incredible. I mean, the anthology, like just to see all the different essays and all the different things that all these different women were going through, but yet they're all so relatable. Like every single essay that you read, you're like, oh yeah, like I felt like that, or that's happened to me. So I think it's incredible. I think it's a real gift to people to be able to pick up, these anthologies, and especially during a time, like I think the past year, I don't know about you, but well, no, I'm going to not say I don't know about you. You have had the attention span of like 30 people because you read so many books. But, I think sometimes to pick up a book and like really commit to the whole book felt a little bit daunting. So to be able to pick up, the anthology and read a complete beautiful thing in just a few minutes and then pick it up again and do the same thing. We didn't have to have a long attention span. So it was really good. A quarantine anthology was pretty genius.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. But no, this is about you and your book and your process.
And we have, I mean, it's your anthology, but I mean, I got to write something for the next one. So I'm pretty excited about it.
You should. I mean, I loved your essay. Oh my gosh. It was so good.
Really not
it was really
planning on writing. It was not what I was planning on writing, but you just never know what's going to happen. So
you never know. Did you always know you wanted to write?
No, actually, which is kind of interesting. So I actually really liked science when I was in school, like growing up, and I thought maybe I would do something in that field. And I do think, especially in this book, like you see a little bit of that just in, I'm not going to say you see a little bit of that, but like I knew a lot about what I was writing about because I had covered these science beats in college and like had done a lot of, interviews and read a lot of studies about, all the updates, all the things that were happening with IVF and, things like that. So I felt like I had a lot of kind of like the background knowledge that I needed to be able to kind of at least start the book and then, fact check it later kind of thing. But yeah, I thought I would do something in science. And then when I was in high school, I was a senior in high school and I got an internship at my local newspaper. And I said this on Better Connecticut this morning and they were like, this is not real. And I was like, yes, it is. My first article was about a giant squash that someone had grown in their garden and it looked like Elvis. Like it had like the face of Elvis on it. And I was like, no, I mean, if you live in a small Southern town, like you will read about something like this in your newspaper. So that was my first article, my foray into journalism. And it was so silly. It was like the silliest thing. But I started writing this garden game series for the newspaper and I would write about, these silly things that people grew in their gardens. But I was also writing about their lives and their families. And I was just so struck by the idea that everyone had a story. And so it led me to go to journalism school, but I always swore the whole time I was there that I was going to tell real stories. People would say, oh, you're a writer. Are you going to write a novel? And I would always say, I don't really think so. And I kind of had in the back of my mind that like, maybe I'll write a book. Maybe I'll try to write a book. Cause I mean, who knows, you don't know you can do it, I think, until you do it. But I would think like, well, maybe I'll try to write a book one day just cause I think that'd be like a cool bucket list thing, not to get published or anything like that. Just to like, I did this, like, go me, but it wasn't something that was like part of my plan. But, I just think things continue to evolve. So I got a master's in literature just because I wanted to read. I was like, I've written for 4 years. I'm going to go read for 2 years. And so I did. And that was fantastic. And then I went and worked in finance and kind of missed writing while I was doing that and started getting all these story ideas. And I sat down and started writing and actually wrote I wrote 3 complete manuscripts before I tried to get an agent and then signed with an agent and actually ended up not selling the book that I signed with the agent for. And then in the meantime, winning a writing contest for Dear Carolina and getting a contract at Berkeley for that one. So I'm making it sound, like I'm making it sound like this short story was very long and twisty and emotional and took years. And I don't know that, there were a lot of rejection letters, I still have them in folders. And every now and then, if I'm like, this is really hard, I'm tired, I'm like, go back and look at those rejection letters and like, remember how far you've come, because I don't think anyone gets here without a lot of effort. I mean, I guess maybe some people do, but I think most everyone has experienced that feeling of having to really work hard to get where they are. And it's not a job that comes super easily, I don't think, for most people.
No, I agree. And I mean, it seems to me you have to write at least a couple novels before you have any hope of selling any of them. Like people should just know that starting out. Like, Don't even try. You'll think it's amazing and you'll pour your heart into it. But that is your first one. And like, just get it. You have to do it to get to the 4th one or the 5th one. But like, that's going to be your practice book.
Mm-hmm. No, that's such a good point. And I think my like saving grace and all of that was that, and this is still my process. So when I'm writing something about 2/3 of the way through, or even like half of the way through, I'll start to get another idea that I think is the best idea I've ever had. it's so much better than the idea I'm working on now. And oh my gosh, like, what am I doing with this silly little book? Because this one is just brilliant. Like, your next idea is always your best idea, right? And so I'll kind of start writing. And so I think my real saving grace was that, like, by the time I was finished with my first manuscript, I was about a third of the way through my second one, and I knew how much better it was. And by the time I was finished with my second, I was about a third of the way through my third, and I knew how much better it was. And I do think by that third one, I think you have to find your voice a little bit. I think that takes some time. You can't just, and maybe, and I don't know, and maybe it comes with age too. I mean, I was young, like I was, in my mid 20s, like starting all of this. And so I do think finding your voice like takes time, and maybe learning a little bit more about who you are. Not to say there are plenty of like 20-year-olds who write brilliant, beautiful things. So, but for me, it took practice to be able to find like who I am on the page and what I want to say. And so there's definitely something to that, I think.
I think you're right. And if people listening want to put some questions in the chat, Kristy will be answering them shortly. So start putting your questions in. One last thing about the book I wanted to mention that I thought was interesting was the feelings of loss that everybody had, particularly Amelia, when Greer passed away, as like a big deal Instagram person, because that is only just now sort of happening more and more, whereas before you didn't like know the ins and outs of people's lives quite as intimately. And I don't feel like you could know them as well as you do now, particularly someone like Greer, who had written her own books and had like 2 million followers and blah, blah, blah. So I don't know. I just found that to be also really interesting, because you can mourn the loss of someone you don't even really know yourself. And that also counts as loss and grief. And I feel like a lot of people are going through that right now in many ways.
Oh, it's so true. You're such a good interviewer. I have said so many things tonight that I have not said in the like 10 million times I've talked about this book. So thank you for hitting on all these things. But yes, I think that is such a cultural phenomenon right now where, I mean, I think you're a really good example of that. Like, I've met you one time super briefly at East Hampton Authors Night, but I feel like I really know you, because I follow you and I know what you're doing and I know what your kids are up to. And I know when your son's home from boarding school. I mean, so like, it's a real thing. And like, I listen to your interviews. And I mean, I do think that people, we feel connections with people that we don't really know. And so, I understand it. Like when someone will come up to me at a signing and they'll be like, no, but like, I know you. And I'm like, well, yeah, because like I talk about myself all the time online. So you do know me, you really do. But I do think that we feel attached to people in these ways. And especially, I think Greer was someone who, in this story, we do find out, and I worked really hard at making it so that we knew she wasn't a saint, because I think when someone dies and they're young and it's kind of tragic, that we do tend to saint them. And that would have been a really hard road in the story. She could not be so perfect. And I think her journal entries do sort of serve the purpose of making it so she's not quite such a saint in the story. But, she is someone that is like really trying to do good for the world, in addition to like just being cool, and like people want to know her, So I do think that we do feel those losses of people, and we feel like we know them. We feel like we're a part of their lives and their stories, and, we root for them. And it's kind of cool, honestly. I think people tend to talk about like, the negative parts of like these online communities, and, oh, people can just say anything and da-da-da. And that's true. But also, I think it's given us really strong connections with people, especially during this time when we didn't have these real life connections anymore. So I think it's important. And it's funny that, that wasn't something we weren't experiencing the pandemic when I started writing this book. But I think that is something that maybe we understand a little bit more even now than we did before, because we are so connected via social media.
It's true. I feel it's been a saving grace for so many people through this time when you couldn't be with people, especially with everybody just spanning out and hunkering down themselves. This it's just, anyway, I completely agree. And I loved that you put that in. So,
yeah.
Well, I don't want to monopolize your time if people have questions. And Yeah. Anyway, I think, but I could chat with you all day about this book, and I really just honestly love it.
Thank you. Well, thank you. Well, I am so grateful that you took the time to read it, because I almost like feel guilty, because I'm like, I know how many, just so many books that you're reading all the time. And so I do not take it for granted, because I know how many books I'm reading all the time. And so sometimes when you're so overloaded and you get to read one more, but you're like, can I fit it in? Like, I just don't know. So I totally understand.
It was a pleasure. It was a pleasure. I read most of it on the elliptical machine, if it makes you feel any better. So, anyway.
So you were that's really good. That's really good. I miss my elliptical. We're doing renovations at our house, and I don't have my elliptical, so I can't read and work out at the same time, which is really unfortunate.
My gym just opened in my building after like a year, so I'm like very excited. I'm sure I'll stop going in another week, but for now, I got to read your book and work.
For
out.
now, yes, that's awesome.
Are you ready for audience Q&A?
Yes, sure.
All right. So first off, thank you both so much. Really, like it. I have never met either of you before, and it's such a pleasure getting to hear you talk, and just like so full of like I am a big fan of both of yours.
Oh, well, we're a big fan of you now. I'm a big Shane fan.
Amanda has spent time with you twice today, Zibby. So you might have like someone like literally following you around. I don't know, might be awesome.
Love it.
A lot of people saying hi. A lot of people saying how they've already read the book, which is so surprising. I mean, not surprising. The book came out 2 days ago.
It's amazing. Like I have been, I guess you think that maybe by your 7th book, you would not be like monstrously overwhelmed. I am like monstrously overwhelmed by the love for this book. Like I can't even like really process it. And I think just like I've been running around and being on tour, and I'll get home and I'm like, I'm just so grateful for everybody who's just read it already. And it means so much to me. It really does. It's like the best thing in the world to know that something that you worked on for, a long time is like already, it's kind of making its way into people's living rooms and porches. And I'm really grateful. I really am.
Well, they can pick it back up again in like a month and reread it, or like give it to your friends, like so that they can read it, and then you have someone to talk to about it. Yeah.
Yes. And you can get your copy from Left Bank Books and like give it to your mom for Mother's Day, and give it to, your favorite college or high school grad for graduation gift. I mean, I'm just throwing it out there, support your favorite local bookstore, Left Bank Books. It's the best.
Endless possibilities. Since so many people have already read the book, I did drop a link in the comments for your next anthology, Zibby, which is coming out in November. Is that correct?
Oh, thank you. That's really nice. I appreciate that.
I mean, especially with
November.
Kristy's essay going to be in there, I'm certain that a lot of people will be very interested in.
It's going to be so fun. I'm really excited for it. It's going to be great.
So my question is, while they're waiting for the next anthology to come out, and since so many people have already read this book that just came out 2 days ago, what should they add to their reading list that they might not already have there?
Do you want to take this one, or do you want me to? I mean, we can both take it, but do you want to go first, or do you want me to? Okay.
You go. You go first.
Okay. Well, I will say I have another book coming out October 26th, like shameless plug. But Christmas in Peachtree Bluff. It's the 4th book in my Peachtree Bluff series. The other 3 books are Slightly South of Simple, The Secret to Southern Charm, and The Southern Side of Paradise. So those who have read Peachtree, it was not a popular decision in the end for me to quit Peachtree. So during all of the craziness during COVID, I had so many requests to write another Peachtree book. So Christmas in Peachtree Bluff is coming. I'm so excited about it. It was so fun to write. But oh my gosh, I've read so many good books right now. Mary Kay Andrews, The Newcomer, it comes out next week? Week after next. Mary Alice Monroe's The Summer of Lost and Bound is in like 3 or 4 weeks. Surviving Savannah by Patty Callahan Henry came out a few weeks ago. It's absolutely gorgeous. What have I read lately that's so good? What is Kay Mai's new book called? That Oh my goodness, I'm like completely blanking. And anyway, she's going to be our guest on Friends and Fiction on Sunday, and it's gorgeous. And she is in Forbes next week as like one of their 50 like most powerful women. I don't know. It's very exciting for her. Anyway, just I've read so many great things lately that I could just go on and on and on and on and on. Anything from you? What about you, Zibby? I know you've read everything too.
Oh man, I know. I'm like, what have I been reading? Well, next week I'm interviewing Kate Doty, who wrote a book called Mergers and Acquisitions about what she learned from working for the Vows column in the New York Times, and
That's
how
awesome.
that affected like her own love life and everything. Anyway, I'm like so excited about that one. And Emma Gannon wrote a book called Olive. I'm also excited about. I'm doing that next week. Yeah. Jenny Lee has a new book, Anna K. Far Away. I'm just going through the books I just packed for this weekend away.
No, I am really excited about that one. That one looks so good. And I love that cover. Like just, it shows you the power of a good cover. Cause every time I see the cover, I'm like, I can't wait to read that. And I don't even know what the book's about, but I know I want to read it because the cover's so great. And she's so great, but you know.
She's so great. Yeah. Yeah. There's just so many, everything. I don't know.
Everything.
Missed opportunity.
I'm like,
what is $1 million? I'm very excited.
No, I read $1 million too. And then when people ask me, I completely blank. I'm like, what have I just read? I know that I've like loved everything that I've read recently. This has been a really seriously great book year though. I mean, it really has. So for all of the things that, you know, the pandemic has kind of taken away, it's given us some really good reading material. And I think I've had more time to read because I haven't really been on the road as much. So I feel like I'm ready to know
Well, I hope someone was taking notes because I want to add all those books to my list as well. I will.
What about you?
definitely-
What are you recommending, Shane?
It's so, I just brought home like a bunch of new books today, and so the next up on my list are the new Becky Chambers. I'm going to be talking to Becky in a private event coming up soon, which
Nice.
I just love Becky. I have a queer Jamaican memoir, Kai Miller's Things I Have Withheld, that one of my coworkers read and said, you must read this book.
Oh, that's awesome.
I definitely want to read that book.
I love that.
New Colson Whitehead!
Oh my God.
Oh, wow. I haven't seen that yet.
Oh,
I
I'm
haven't
so
seen that
excited.
either. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Very
That's
excited about
exciting.
that. And Claire McIntosh, this, like, first off, look at,
Yes.
like,
That I have.
Yeah, we are doing an event with Claire.
Amazing swag.
this
Amazing
summer.
programming. I mean,
Hostage. Yeah,
That's
I'm thrilled to read this book.
really cool. What a package right there. That's awesome.
Yeah. We hosted Claire last summer with one of my favorite authors, Ruth Ware. And so I absolutely fell in love with Claire, and they want us to do an event for this book, and I am so thrilled to do it. So I'm really excited because as much as I love like books that like romance and like contemporary women's fiction, whatever you want to call it. I also love deep, dark thrillers. Like those two are my like very polar opposite. Like I love this and I love this. And
I have to do the like really deep, dark thrillers. This is going to sound so silly, but I have to read them like on the beach in the sunshine in the summer. Because if I read them like at night before bed in the winter, I'm like, oh my God, everyone's coming to get me. Like I'm going to be murdered in my sleep. Like I have no boundaries. Like the story is real to me. It's very bizarre.
I feel the same way. Sometimes I have to listen to them on audiobook. Otherwise it's like too intense to like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a really good idea.
My beach read is always something that will make me sob on the beach. So I'm like the person like on vacation, like reading a book and being like, it's okay, I'm having a good time. Like,
this is what I wanted to do, my vacation.
I love that too. Isn't that crazy that we all like get so much enjoyment out of crying? Crazy. It makes no sense, but I feel the same way. Like anything that makes me really feel anything, I'm like, oh, I love this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's really bizarre. I don't know.
Diane had the question, do you cry a lot while writing?
Never. Almost never. I know, which is really strange because I don't know why this is, because like I cannot tell you like the people that have like emailed me like, I'm like sobbing through the first 50 pages of this book. And I'm like, really? Like, I mean, I don't know what it is, because I like, it's like when I'm reading or like watching something, I'm a wreck. But somehow when I'm writing it, like I'm feeling it, but maybe because it's like coming out on the page, I'm not like crying while I'm writing it. I'm not really sure. It's a very strange sort of thing. But I have talked to a lot of authors about this, and a lot of authors are that way. So I'm like, maybe I'm not like a sociopath, which is good. That's a good thing to know about myself. But like I've had this conversation, like Mary Alice Monroe said she has to cry, and that's how she knows that she's like hit on the right thing. But then like I've talked to lots of other authors who were like, I'm the same way. Like I'm writing something deeply emotional, but I'm in it. It's not like I'm separate from it. I am so in it, but I'm also somehow like, I'm not like crying about it. I don't know what it is. And maybe it's because I know how it's going to turn out, I think. And I think that could be part of it. Like, I think part of the thing of something being really sad is not knowing what's going to happen in the end. And since I already kind of know what's going to happen in the end, maybe I'm less sad. I don't know.
Yeah.
I can't
Sometimes if you focus on the words enough, it can distract you, right? Like if you're thinking what word is best, like I feel like even if I'm reading out loud or I'm reading to my kids and I want to cry, like if I focus on each word, then I can stop the crying like right away. So I think it's like the little bits of language that like stem the tide of tears.
I like that. That makes sense.
Sounded good, right? I don't know.
Yeah. He has good answers for things. I like that. I'm gonna go with that. Next time someone asks me, I'm going to say that.
Go ahead. You can take it. I don't even need any credit. It's fine.
Zibby TM.
When we start having it on t-shirts, you know.
Doris's question, and hopefully this isn't spoiling anything, but did you start out knowing what the family secrets would be, or did they just happen as you wrote?
She's already read the book, so she's gonna know what I mean. Thanks, Doris. But the sort of big family secret in the end, I did not know that that was going to happen at all. I didn't know there was going to be a family secret at all. I also did not know that Greer and Amelia were going to have a secret together. So those were both sort of surprises to me. And I actually didn't realize until I was finished with the book that every character's secret contributes to what ultimately happens to the embryos. Like that wasn't something that I sat down and was like, they're all going to have a secret. And as the secrets come out, what happens to the embryos will be revealed. It wasn't until after I was finished with the book and I was like, oh, weird. They all had a secret. And like everyone was like a stepping stone to the end of what was actually going to happen, even the ones that didn't have anything to do with the embryos at all. So, yeah, I'm a big pantser. Like I don't ever really know what's going to happen. And it gives me a lot of enjoyment as I'm writing.
So Kristen Harmel's here this evening. So she says hi, which is really exciting because I think this is like a celebrity popping into the event.
It is. She's a total celeb. Her new book is next on my nightstand from when I get home. It's called The Forest of Vanishing Stars. And her research for this book, y'all, like I'm so excited to read it. And I couldn't, like I almost brought it on tour with me and I was like, nope, I'm not going to do it. Like I'm going to sit down and I'm going to have nothing else to do. And I'm just going to read it because I've been hearing about it for so long. And her last book was like, I shouldn't say this because it's like bad to all the other books, but it was kind of my favorite book of 2020, The Book of Lost Names. So don't tell anyone else I said that. It's just between us.
No, I mean,
we won't say a word.
I think she's
just
the
between
only other author that you, I mean, maybe there are other authors hiding here that you did read last year that are now very sad.
Everyone else is crushed. You know, they're turning it off. We've all just left this little virtual thing.
I'm getting hate.
Never to come back.
I'm getting hate mail.
They're trying to cancel their orders. Cancel.
There was a related question,
Wait, what did she say though? She had a question that I didn't answer. Did she have a question? Oh no, you just said she was here.
yeah, she's just here. She says hi. Yep.
Hey, Kristy.
But there was a related question that I saw that I wanted to ask, but I'll find it and come back to it.
Did you read the one from Maureen? That was a good one about design. Do you see that one? You want me to read it? Do you always try to incorporate your love of design into your books?
Well, that was a good one. Who asked that?
Maureen Halloran Walker.
Oh, hey, Maureen. Yes, I do. And I will say that's like actually one of the times that like sometimes when I'm thinking about like where a character's living or where they're going or what they're like, I'll actually like go on Design Chic, which is my design blog with my mom, and I'll like find a house and like that's the house and I'll describe the house, which is sort of weird because I don't do that with anything else. Like I don't do it with the characters. I don't really do it with the settings, but like in the houses, I like want to know where I am. Like to the point that sometimes my editor will be like, it's enough details about the room. Like, let's back that up a little bit. Like not everyone cares that much about what the house looks like or whatever. So, but I like to know where I am, and it's kind of fun to get to like sort of feel it out a little bit. That's a good question.
I love your taste, by the way. The homes that you post in the rooms. I'm just like, I love it. Like I would live.
I love your new office. I'm going to come like, just like,
oh, thank you
for a while.
Thank you. Which is not here. Don't look behind me. It's don't judge me based on the crazy conference room I happen to be in. Please don't associate this with me again.
Conference room B is not in Zibby's house.
No, thank you. Yes.
There are gorgeous windows in conference room B though. Yeah. So
they're pretty.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Anne is asking, how is Cape Carolina similar to where you live?
So I actually originally was going to set the book in Morehead City, which is like right over the bridge from where I live in Beaufort. So it's very similar. I mean, it's very based on the area where I live, but more so like kind of Atlantic Beach, Morehead City versus Beaufort's like a very historic, like very like downtown centric kind of area. Where I feel like Cape Carolina, like there is a downtown and you see it a little bit and like there are like little festival and stuff that they have. But for the most part, you know, they're on this peninsula and they're kind of a little more secluded, which was fun to write too. I love writing those like towns where everybody's in the story and everybody's all together. But this was really fun too. And just, and I was actually one of the rental houses that we lived in when we were out of our house for the hurricane was like on the end of a peninsula, like kind of in this like marshy area. And it was so beautiful. And so I really based where the house where Dogwood is on the end of this peninsula on that setting. Now we were not living in this like big, beautiful, like family home or anything. I mean, it was a cute beach house, but the house was not real, but the setting was. So that was kind of fun.
Megan's question, are there any parts of this book that you loved that didn't make the final cut?
Yes, actually. There were several of Greer's journal entries that I really loved, but I cut because I didn't think they like directly kept the story moving. And I was bummed. Like I went back and forth because I would try to talk myself into it. I'd be like, well, but we really get to know her more. But then I'm like, but we don't really need to know that part. So I did cut some of those parts. And I said the other night that I was going to try to go back and find them and like, you know, so people like do a little PDF or something so people can read them if they want to, but I don't know if I can find them, but I'm sure they're in like an early draft of the book. I try to save like all my different drafts, but I'm not as organized about that as I should be. But yeah, I think that was maybe the only thing. This was, like kind of in retrospect, this was a really easy book to edit. There was not a ton that we did to this one, which was kind of great because I love to write. I don't love to edit as much. And usually the editing takes me a lot longer than the writing. So that was kind of nice that I didn't have so much editing to do on it.
The next question is from Kristen. Kristen Harmel. First off, Kristy, I have ordered about 25 copies of your book because I love you, and I'm going to place a Left Bank Books order tomorrow. Thank you so much.
Kristen, I love you.
But Kristen does have a question, and this is for both of you. So Mother's Day is coming up. What does motherhood mean to you, and how, I want to ask how it affects your writing, and how do you incorporate it into your writing?
What a good question. She must be a writer.
I know. Yeah.
Do you want me to go, or do you want to go, Sydney?
What does motherhood mean to me? I mean, like so much. How do you not? I mean, motherhood. I don't even know where to start. Motherhood is like for me at least. I have 4 kids. It seems to be no matter. It's the lens through which I see everything now. And so when I'm writing anything, that's like, it's like those are the glasses that I wear. That's how I see the world. Is as a caretaker first, and then everything else next. So anything I work on, it always has it. Not always, but I feel like I end up throwing in that I have kids often. And I love. There was one line in your book, Kristy, where you talked about the saddest thing is like mourning the kids you never had, or not being able to be a mother to the kids that you wish you'd had. I mean, it's just like, it's so powerful, but I don't know. I'm sure you have a better answer to this.
No, that is actually my almost verbatim answer. I was going to say that motherhood is the lens through which I see the world, which is like exactly what you said, but it is, I think, yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. It was like that exact phrase. I think, actually, like when I look back on it, my first book that came out was Dear Carolina, and I wrote it right after little Will was born. He was like 3 days old when I started that book, and I can look at everything I wrote before then, and it was like, I shouldn't say, this is not me saying like, well, if you haven't been a mother, but just for me, it opened me up so much, like emotionally, to feel all these things that I had never felt before, and that I didn't even know I was capable of feeling. And I think it made my writing very, very different, because I like felt the world in a very different way than I ever had before. And so I look at those manuscripts I wrote before he was born, and I'm like, well, that's kind of what was missing, is there is not that, I think everything else I wrote after is like, has a lot more emotion to it. So, yeah, I mean, again, that was just like a personal experience. I don't think I've never been like if you ask like my friends, I'm not a very like surfacely emotional person. Like I don't like cry a lot, or like, but inside, like I'm just dripping in them. So it's very bizarre. So I think that, and I think maybe that's part of it. It's like being a mother now.
I cry all the time, and I'm not a mother. So.
I obviously cry all the time.
I know. I mean, that's what I'm saying
tonight, like 10 times. So.
No, that's what I'm saying. Is I'm like, it's not like I'm saying. So I guess I'm not like, well, unless you're a mother, like you don't know. I'm just saying, for me, somehow it was like I tapped into all of these things that I never really knew that I could feel. So it was a very powerful experience for me.
All right, I think we have time for one last question. Again, for both of you, Christine is asking, and this is probably like, do your husbands read your books?
I read out loud.
No, you go. I'm sorry. You were like, we have this little delay, so I'm like, I can't. Okay, you go.
No, I was just going to say, every single thing I write, I read out loud to my husband. Before,
that's interesting.
If it's terrible or not.
That's interesting.
Anyway, you go.
Yeah, no, I read like essays and columns and stuff out loud to my husband and my son, because my son will be like, what? Like, no, that is not your best work. He is so funny. This is like off topic and not what you asked, but I was making like a million videos for bookstores before I went on tour that like said, hey, can you make a video that we can put on our social media? And he taped them for me, and we did like 22 of them or something. And I was like, just like on a roll and like going through it, and he would stop and he'd be like, Mom, that really wasn't your best one. We need to redo that one. And I'd be like, really? So he's a pretty tough critic. But yeah, so my husband, sometimes there's like certain things that I like absolutely he has to read before they come out because there's some things that I need him to like fact check or something that he knows a lot about. And especially with this book, I kept making him read Parker because I've never written a male POV before, and that made me very nervous. But sometimes he doesn't read them before they come out, and he's a big listener, so he'll listen to them on Audible or whatever after they come out. But yeah, I mean, he always gets them read somehow or another. But he actually just got his first pair of reading glasses, and so he was reading Under the Southern Sky, and he was like, "This is amazing! Like, I'm going to read everything now." He's like, "I didn't really realize that I can't see."
Turns out he's never read anything you've ever written before.
He probably has. He's probably never read any of it.
Oh my gosh. The truth comes out. Oh my gosh.
Yep.
All right. Well, I know that you have both had an incredibly long day with multiple events. So I want to thank you both so much for this just enlivening conversation. Like, you're both fantastic. Kristy's book, signed copies. I will show you. I probably can't zoom in far enough. But Kristy was so signed a bunch of book plates for us, sent them to us. So we have signed copies available at Left Bank Books. You can get a copy. It is a beautiful, beautiful, just great gift as well. So think about how Mother's Day is coming up and order a ton for your friends, for your family, for everyone. Kristy, Zibby, thank you so much. It was really just such a pleasure meeting both of you this evening, and it was such a delight. So thank you.
Thank y'all. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having me. It was awesome. Thank y'all. I really appreciate it.
Oh, and thank you to the St. Charles City County Library as well, our co-partners for the event, so co-promoters. So thank you to St. Charles City County Library too. All right, have a good night, audience. Thank you so much for being here, and hope to see you again really soon.
Good night, everybody.